Hello and welcome to this London Embroidery School Stitchalong. I'm going to be your host for today, Natasha, and we are today working on this knotted landscape design piece, which we released a little while ago onto our website, and I think quite a few of you have purchased it, but I just wanted to show you a few of the really fun techniques that we have in this deep dive class, as I think it's a really interesting one. A few years ago, when we used to do a few more classes in person, I actually just tried to develop a knots class back then, and it didn't really gel together properly. It was too technical and basically not fun and pretty enough. So this is my kind of like second stab at this general idea that I was having about knots, because I think they're really exciting, and there are such a range of knotted embroidery stitches that you can use, and you can create such beautiful textures with them that it seemed a shame that we didn't have a class that really, dug down deep into the knots and what you can achieve with them, the textures you can create, how they can be combined. This class is therefore of an intermediate level. We would suggest that you have done some embroidery before, that you're familiar with, stitching and are comfortable with using a needle. It is taught from a place of some previous experience. So yeah, you need to have a little bit of stitching behind you just so that you can make the most of the intermediate techniques that we talk about. I'm starting off up the top here with the classic French knot. It's probably the knot that most people will have come across at some point if you've done a little bit of embroidery. It's often featured in a lot of beginners classes, as it is in our own, and it's a lovely one for demonstrating a detached stitch. For that reason, we kick off with it so that most people can get going with something that they've probably tried before and can actually, get some stitching down. This is quite a long design. You would probably be working on it for, maybe 15 hours or so. I would have thought. Obviously, it depends on your speed and how confident you are and all that sort of thing, as to how long each design takes each individual person. Some of you eagle-eyed watchers may have noticed that I'm mixing between a single wrap for my French knots and a double wrap, again to start to build up a little bit of difference in the textures that we can create and the sizes of the knots that are performed. The one difference that you probably wouldn't have done if you were trying this knots class, having done French knots before, is that we are working in a pearl thread. So that's this one here, which you can see has got this beautiful twist to it. You can see the twist is really strong, and it's a little bit more sheeny than if we take an embroidery thread here, embroidery cotton. You can see the difference in the texture just straight off the bat. So you can't split this pearl thread. You use it at its one thickness, unlike the stranded embroidery cotton that you can break down into, smaller amounts of thread at a time. But doing it in this thread, hopefully just really quickly introduces you to something new whilst you're working on something that's familiar in the in the stitch type that you would be starting off with. And you can see that those knots, they make quite a firm knot actually in comparison to the stranded embroidery cotton, because it is, a stronger twist to the thread with these pearl threads. It's one of the things that we really wanted to dig into with this class, was really playing around not only with the styles of stitching, or being knot based within that sort of family, but also with the materials that you are making the knots in. So you can see the differences that your choice of material makes. And so many of our classes are understandably and unsurprisingly done in stranded cotton, and you do get a fair amount of stranded cottons with this particular class. In fact, you get 11 of them. But yes, you also try out the perle thread. You've got a tapestry wool too, so something nice and thick and spongy. And we also work with some ribbon. It's an organdy ribbon we have here, which I'll hopefully show you in a second. It makes for a really beautiful colour palette, I'm sure you will agree. This is just right up my street here, with the lovely sort of soft tones, slightly muted but not too much. A few little like punchy colours in there just to give it a bit of a lift. So I started to talk about the kit, didn't I? And so in your kit, yes, you have 11 stranded cotton threads. You get 3 sizes of needle, all of which you would be working with for various types of knot and material combinations. You get your ribbon, you get your yarns, you get your printed base fabric like the one I'm working on here, and you get your paper copy of the design, just denoting where each technique should be used. Most of the instructions are either on that piece of paper, or the majority of them are actually in the online class that goes along with the kit. So purchasing the online class is essential with the kit, so that you get the full set of information, and so you can see us demonstrating everything for you to do. It is a 3-part class, so as I say, it really is a deep dive, and it's a good amount of hours you would need to complete this sort of design. So it's something to pick up and put down as suits, and as you have the time to pop in a few of those extra stitches. Now I'm just finishing off this thread, and I'm going to leave that over here as we no longer need that one, and I've come to the end. So let's move on to one of the other stitches that we have. Now this is a variation of the French knot that I was just working on. But as I've started to do over here, you can see it makes a really sort of loopy, wonderful, fluffy surface that you can create with this very small variation on the French knot. So I've switched over now to a stranded embroidery thread, more of the classic, more like what you will be familiar with. And of course, you can single wrap that for a small French knot. I'm still working with all 6 strands here, so it is kind of as big as it can be, or you can double wrap it and make for a bigger knot. And then for a loopy one, you can come up, double wrap, place the needle down towards where you want your stitch to finish, but as you do so, you want to grab the upper loop of the French knot and hang on to that as you pull it through to the back of the embroidery. And that just makes for a little loop that's left on the surface but is secured by the rest of the knot. So let's do that again. So as with all French knots, you wrap around the needle, place the needle point back down into the fabric, close to where you came up but not in exactly the same place. You grab hold of the loose part, the second wrap of your French knot, and ease the needle down through the fabric, hanging onto that little loop with your upper hand, allowing it to tighten and leaving this little loop on the surface. I'm going to try that one more time for you guys, but maybe in a little bit more space of its own. So hopefully that's super clear. So we come wrap around, needle point down, take hold of this upper part of the loop, it's the loosest part, and just hold on to that with your fingers of this non-dominant hand, using the other hand to just ease the needle down and through the fabric and allowing that to tighten underneath the loop to make a single sort of clear loop on the top. So a really fun one, and such a small change, I think, but for a big impact on what you can do to adjust your stitching and to add further textures, as I say. With this one, I always think it's best to start at the top and work downwards, simply so that you don't catch your beautifully made loops in with the stitching that you put in afterwards. It's quite hard to work above it because then the loops are like in your way. So the order of your stitching becomes more important as we start to, think about what we want to achieve and how we want to push the boundaries of the embroidery that we have and the embroidery knowledge we have to create new and interesting textures, which hopefully should keep your interest going and provide, those new little serotonin hits with the embroidery world for you to keep you interested, keep the momentum going. I really enjoyed working on this particular class because it is quite repetitive, if you like, but I say that and I mean that as a good thing. I feel like it really allows you to relax into the design. Once you get used to a particular knot type, you can really lean in and get comfortable with what you're working on and not feel like you kind of have to have your brain too much engaged. It's more just about the doing and hopefully enjoying the process, allowing your mind to relax a little bit. I have a small section over here that is finished to show you, which was one of my very early samples when developing this. And you can see just how much texture we've got going on. So these are the little loops that I've been working on at the moment. And you can see how much movement they have, mixing in that grey there with the off-white threads that we were just working with. In contrast, you have that perlé thread underneath for the kind of like sky area. And then if you look sort of that little bit further down, you can see just how dense a design this is. You're really looking to build it up, make it look luscious and rich and luxurious. And I think that we really achieve that with this particular design. Anyway, I've been talking consistently for the last 15 minutes now, so I should remind you, if you have any questions about what I'm doing here today, or just any questions about embroidery in general that you'd like to post to me whilst you have me, please do feel free to pop your messages into the comments box below. I will be trying to check in on those periodically when I'm not purely looking at the embroidery that I'm stitching. So feel free to pop anything in there that you want to let me know about or you'd like to hear more about. What else have we got going on at the moment? So I expect some of you are probably already mailing list subscribers to our newsletter. And so you will probably have heard about the very exciting return of our in-person classes in the London Embroidery School studio. We have that coming back in September, which is with a wonderful goldwork embroiderer artist called Clara from Clara Stitching, and she is going to be teaching one of her own designs in our studio, so it's really lovely to have such an exciting collaboration going on. As I say, the first date of that is in September. Oh, that's this month now. Look at us. Yes, but that one is sold out. So we have released a second date, which is the 21st of October, which is a Saturday. It will be taking place from 10 till 4 p.m. So that everyone has a chance to get a load of stitching done that day. And it is a beginner's goldwork class. It's a really beautiful design. Clara's designs are so iconically hers. The moment you kind of will see and get to know her work, you'll really recognise her style. So we're really excited to be partnering with her on this. And yeah, as I say, there's only 2 places left for that October date, which is the second date. And at the moment, we don't have any further dates in. So I would suggest if you would like to learn from Clara in person or you'd like to come for an in-person class, then really don't delay. get those bookings in, because as I say, there's just the 2 places left, and once they're gone, that may well be it. It's lovely to be able to work with Clara, but we don't have that many dates that we can pin her down for, so you've got to make the most of it whilst we have the opportunity to do so. I'm just going to move down onto a new style of knot now, as I came to the end of the thread up here. Hopefully that's nice and clear about how to do the looped French knots. If we come down over here, you can see I've done a few little stitches to get started with, because we're now working in our yarn, so you can probably hear the difference. There is a bit more resistance. We are working with a nice large needle. This is a chenille needle that I've got here. You can see it has a nice long eye so that you can get your yarn into it, but also a nice large shaft so it makes a decent size hole through the fabric, because that is actually part of the tricky thing of working with thicker materials, is not only fitting it through the eye of the needle, but making sure that you have a big enough hole created by the needle through which the material can travel. So what we are moving on to here is called a Chinese knot, also known as a Peking knot. It makes a different shaped knot to a French knot. So if I just, for a second, because they'll all blend in, so don't worry, you won't notice. But if we do a French knot, so we do a double wrapped French knot, you'll see it makes a little sort of donut shaped knot. And it sits quite high and quite proud off the fabric. By comparison, if we come and do a Chinese knot, it has much more of a kind of 3-way twist effect. It sits a little bit flatter to the fabric. It's more like a ball than a donut, and doesn't have quite such a pronounced center. So you may be able to see the difference, hopefully on screen here. But they do make quite a different shape. So to make a Chinese knot, you go in and underneath the thread or yarn, as we're working with at the moment, twist it away from you so that you have an open loop through which you can drop down the needle close to where you came up, but not in exactly the same place, and allow that thread to tighten, and then pull with a little bit of tension on your working thread, pull the needle through to the back. So that's coming up. And we go in and underneath the yarn, twist it away from yourself to make a loop. Bring the needle down through the fabric, close to where you came up, but not in exactly the same place. Allow the working thread to tighten around the needle with a little bit of tension on this top thread. The working thread, pull the needle through to the back. I can see here, I just have a quick question from, I want to say Marie Visserman. I hope that that's correct. Apologies if it's not the correct pronunciation. She says, I can't continue to watch it now. Would it be recorded on your videos? Yes, this will be available afterwards on Instagram. The recording will still be there from what we do today. Equally, these recordings do, in a little bit of time, make it onto our YouTube channel as well. So if you would prefer watching it in a landscape format a bit later on, you will catch that. And as always, we will have our mailing list be notified of new videos and blog posts and all sorts, new products, all that sort of thing coming up. So as I say, that really is a good place to be if you want to find out what's going on with London Embroidery School, what exciting things you can be doing, what new products we've been working on, and just generally things that you can get involved with to keep the embroidery conversation going, because we think it's worthwhile and it's interesting, but I'm hugely biased on that front. I love embroidery and clearly can't get enough of it. So yes, we want to keep chatting about it, and it seems like there's enough of you guys out there who are also really excited about what you can learn from embroidery and what it can do for you. So yeah, we will keep that good stuff coming. Hopefully that answers your question. Let me see if there's any others. Right, what have we got here? Hi, Margaret, RHS from Rhode Island, USA. Hello. One question, which direction is correct for wrapping a round needle for a French knot? So with the French knot, how is the best to describe this? I would say in a clockwise motion going up the thread. So if this is my clock face, the motion I'm making is in a clockwise direction, so that we can wrap and then drop it down and it form a French knot. Hopefully that answers your question. Thanks for joining us today, Margaret. Lovely to have someone from the US joining us. I'm always fascinated to see where you guys are coming in from, and hoping basically that this is a good time for you guys. I do just try and work it into the general working day as to when is good, but obviously it's always tricky when you try and do live things that it's not going to work for everybody. So hopefully there are a few people that this is good for. And yeah, if you're posing your questions, you clearly were able to make it, which is lovely. It's always nice to know that I'm chatting to some people directly. It makes it a lot easier, I have to say, on my part. Now, I've just finished off that piece of yarn because we've come to the end of that particular thread. This is a very, very thirsty design, is what I'm going to say. Knots, because you're creating so much texture, so much height, use a lot of thread. Hence why, there are so many supplies. This is not a full kit that I have here for you. It's just a bit of a taster of what's obviously going on. And as I said up here, the order in which you work when you're doing something that is so textured is important. Really, really important, in fact. So yeah, when we go through the class itself, we do everything in a particular order, kind of working mostly from the top forwards. And for me, I like to think about that not only from a textural basis, but it means that kind of everything that's in the foreground. So if we have a little look at this again, everything that's in the foreground, your heather and your bigger trees and your grasses, all of which are kind of at the front, and these rocks over here when it's the full design, they are all physically further forward, further towards the viewer. And so I think it really helps to kind of sell the illusion of depth and, a little bit of realism to, not a hugely realistic design, but it's fun all the same, And it just helps to bring it along that little bit for you. So I'm moving on to the ribbon now, which I'm sure will hold a lot of interest for quite a few of you. This is a tough material to work with. As I say, the ribbon is quite thick. You do need to make sure you're using a big enough needle. And hence why we supply a nice chunky, I think it's a size 22 chenille needle with the kit for working on this sort of thing. And therefore you are a little bit limited with how large thread width you can use for your ribbon, but also the style of knot that's appropriate for this. So I'm just going for a single wrap French knot, and you'll notice there's a fair bit more sort of wiggling through the fabric. That's okay, just to make the hole big enough to bring that material through. But do watch the twist. You don't want your ribbon to twist too much whilst you're working on it. Once again, we go in and underneath, we wrap around, we tighten it a little bit. We don't want it to be really tight because again, that's just going to add more resistance to trying to get it through the fabric. We give it a bit of a wiggle through, and we just ease that ribbon in and down. You can see how big a knot each one makes when we do that. So this is lovely for, I like to think of this as kind of like the wet rocks that are by this river that sort of weaves its way forwards in the design. Really harnessing the slightly shiny quality of the organdy ribbon that we have here. Also sort of enjoying the slightly lighter effect of the little edge of the ribbon, adding a little bit of extra interest to the knot itself. You know, it gets really wound in there and gives it a little bit more contrast. And kind of starts to set us up for one of the other things that we do within the design, which is start to blend threads. So over here, you can see in the heather section that we have greens, greys and lilacs, all used for that sort of ground of like heather, heathland sort of area. But actually each knot is made up of multiple colours, so that as they twist together in the form of the knot, you get different parts of the thread peeking out, different proportions of the colours coming forwards and being on top and being visible. So you can see these tiny little flecks of grey into the greens over here are achieved by twisting, you know, like a single thread of grey in amongst the greens and then forming the knots with that in a sort of almost like silk shading type approach to knotted stitches. You don't just have to be using one thread at a time. And actually that's something else we talk about when we're doing pistol stitch, which is another stitch that is included in the class, another variation on the French knot, which just allows for, sorry, I'll bring it over again, a little tail to come up and off, and we use that for the grass areas. Now that's just the end of my ribbon coming up there. We'll just pull that back. I really enjoy forming these stitches together and seeing the different effects that you can get from the different materials. But for me, the bit that gets the most exciting is when you have built up a bit of density, there's a lot going on within the area, and you can start to really kind of like fill in all the gaps and see it as a whole design in its entirety. As you work with the ribbon, it does start to get a little bit, it can almost look a little bit laddered or like pulled in places. I don't know whether you can see that there. Don't worry about that. Obviously, we are putting it through quite a lot. And if you're finding that is a problem for you generally, it probably means you need to be working with a slightly shorter length of ribbon at a time, so that each piece, by the time you get to the end, hasn't been pulled around as much. That is true of actually all embroidery thread. If you find that your thread is getting too gnarly, it's getting too fluffy, it's just generally, you know, looking a bit worn and a bit different from when you start a new thread and the stitches that are formed by that thread, then perhaps think about shortening your thread so that each piece is newer and fresher and hasn't been through the fabric so many times before it forms the stitch it is actually, you know, destined to be. As with all French knots, you just want to ease it through the fabric. Don't let that top thread or yarn or piece of ribbon flail wildly. Nobody wants flailing embroidery threads. We want it to all be nice and calm and under control. Just easing that through. And there we go. We also have a new product coming out next week, which this will, well, perhaps if you do follow us on Instagram, which I'm assuming as you're here watching this live, if you are, that you do follow us on Instagram, or perhaps you are new. If you're new, welcome. Maybe think about joining us if you've been enjoying this. I would say, yeah, we have this new product coming next week, which is a beginner's product. So if this is a little bit beyond your current scope of knowledge and believed capabilities, then perhaps next week's new product, which is a Halloween themed product, might be of interest to you. I can show you it in its entirety. I don't think we've actually released any finished images of it on Instagram yet. It is a little pin cushion in the shape of a pumpkin with 30 little designs, spooky little designs on it. You know, things like cauldrons, we've got some skulls, got a little cat, all sorts. In and on the underside too as well. There's a little bat down here. Some lovely cobwebs, lots of magic, plenty of spooky things, really cute. It's a PDF design. It's a PDF only, so you could source your own materials. They're all really easy to find materials. We will help you with your choice of fabric. We show you how to transfer the designs onto your fabric, and then how eventually to make it into your pumpkin itself. What kind of colour palette you use for that is entirely up to you. You can really choose your own adventure with those kits, which I think is a really fun way to go about it, particularly if you are brand new to embroidery. It's a great way to get started. And also, if you are joining me from overseas, like the lovely Margaret is, or perhaps, I don't know if you're still online or not, but for example, if you are from overseas and you don't want to have to wait for your project to arrive in the international post, or you don't want to have to pay for postage, not to worry. We do have these PDF design kits that you can get started with. They're immediately delivered to your email. Always things that you are likely to already have. So you just need some fabric and some embroidery threads, and then a few basic pieces of embroidery equipment. So like a hoop, some pins to pop in at the end, a needle of your choice, whatever you're comfortable with, some scissors, and something to stuff it with. It's a stitch a day design, hence why there are 30 designs on it, so that you can count down the whole way through October and count down to Halloween, ending on Halloween itself, and making up your pumpkin. You don't have to use it as a pincushion even. It could just be a really cute little pumpkin ornament. I think is also a lovely way to use it. Or indeed you could add a little hanging loop to the top and, turn it into a little hanging ornament instead, if using it as a pincushion is something you think you probably wouldn't, actually use it very much. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that coming out. It's the first time we've ever done a Halloween product, because I always think it's not that big deal in the UK, but perhaps I do think it is a bigger deal overseas, and you might agree on that front if you particularly like to celebrate Halloween. I know there are plenty of people who do, and I think it's a really fun little product, really fun little project in fact. So if you're up for making something with a little bit of character, then I think that's a really lovely one to go for, coming out next week. Early access, as always, to our mailing list subscribers. So I'm just going to move on now to our last stitch that I'm going to talk about in the stitch along. It's not the last stitch, however, in the design itself. As you can see, there are loads. I want to say there are 12 stitches. Don't quote me on that, but there's lots basically. All variations on various types of knots. So this knot that I'm doing now is known as a coral stitch, and you can see it is a stitch that is a continuous stitch rather than a detached stitch like we've been doing for all of the other ones I've shown you today. But it has this lovely little knobbly knot in the center of each stitch, giving us that knotted effect while still having a sense of flow. like you might want if you were perhaps denoting something like water, which is exactly what we're doing. So, to make your coral stitch, you lay your thread in the direction in which you want to travel and bring the needle down over the top of that thread, holding it in the direction you want to travel. You can bring that through so it makes a little loop, and then bringing the needle up into the center of that loop, we allow it to gently tighten and it forms a little knot. Right, let's do that again. So when it comes to stitch placement, you'll see I'm currently just following the outside edge of this river line so we get that lovely sense of flow and movement. Bringing the thread forwards in the direction in which we are going, we bring the needle down. Bring that through towards the back, not pulling all the way through, keeping this knot on the surface. Coming back up into the center of that loop, which is just on the other side of the piece of thread that we laid forwards, and then gently allowing all of that to tighten in a nice controlled manner into a little knot. This is where I think you can really start to see this pearl thread having its a moment of its own, where you can really appreciate its quality and what makes it different texturally from the other stitches that we've done either in the yarn or the ribbon or the stranded cotton. Just gives you the opportunity to perhaps explore some materials that you perhaps hadn't thought about. It might be a very subtle change. Working with the pearl thread versus the stranded cotton is not a huge it doesn't feel that different than working with 6-stranded embroidery cotton. It's about the same weight in your hand, but you can see that the finish is slightly different. And perhaps for your own projects, if you'd like to design items of your own, that this might be a nice alternative to stranded cotton if you were perhaps looking for something a little bit more luxurious, a bit more shiny, if you prefer a little bit more of a sheen. It's just the options are all out there for you. You just might not know what is possible. A lot of the time this pearl thread is used for things like crochet. My mum is a very keen crocheter and she likes to use this. So that's always nice to, just kind of have those crossovers within the types of craft. A lot of the time I tend to find that people who are interested in craft are often interested by more than one type of craft. So, and you know how if you're anything like me, you're terrible for stashing materials, being like, oh, that'll be useful one day. And then you end up with a huge amount of materials. So this is a great one for using up some of your supplies and opening up the possibilities of what you might reach for next time you're looking to pick up a project. Exactly the same with the tapestry wool. Obviously, tapestry wool is originally designed and mostly used for tapestry. But that doesn't mean it doesn't make for a great embroidery material as well. Sometimes all it takes is for somebody to sort of just open the door a crack and show you how, and then you can let your own imagination run wild. We're always really fascinated to see what you go on to do with the skills that you learn in our online classes, because it's not just about actually completing the class itself, but also it's lovely to see what you did with the knowledge that you earned. So, I want to say last month's Student of the Month took a couple of our classes, but was actually a cosplayer and used some of the techniques that they had learned. They learned timbre and chiffon roses, and incorporated those into a jacket of an anime character that they had made. So yes, that was, I want to say their name was Santo. But do check out their blog. Each time we have a student of the month, we write a blog about them, about the project that they won for, and yeah, just a little bit about them in general from their Instagram. We share some lovely pictures, and they get a blog as well as winning a 10% off our website voucher. We have a new student of the month gone up today because it's the first of, no, sorry, not today. It's going up on Monday. I chose it today because it's the first of the month. So yeah, we will now be looking for a new student of the month for this month, for September. If you fancy being that winner, do tag us in your London Embroidery School makes. And yeah, we have a look through, we pick a winner, and they win a 10% off the website voucher and a blog about them on our website. So yeah, lots of ways basically to get involved with us. That brings me to the end of what I wanted to go through with you guys today. I hope you've enjoyed this little foray into the Knotted Landscape online class and kit. If you want to find out more about it, you can definitely find it on our website. We have a new kind of menu system, and you will find this one in the creative section, because hopefully you will agree that it is quite creative. Definitely gives room for you to play around with. So you'll find it on there if you want to check it out for yourself. Otherwise, thank you so much to everyone who's joined me today. If I've missed your question, if you submitted one, so sorry about that. I will have a look through them and try and get back to people, or do feel free to direct message us. It will be me picking them up. Otherwise, yes, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure as always, and have a great day. Enjoy stitching. Hopefully you're also making something beautiful. Bye for now.